Let's talk about it. First, Jordan, back on the oval at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The drivers seem to be pretty happy about this, universally happy about it. Do you agree with this?
It's time. I mean, I was all in favor of trying the road course and seeing if it worked. It felt like racing in IMS was just on the oval had gone stagnant, and it was no longer what it once was. It didn't feel special anymore. Try to do something different to juice the action, maybe bring back that energy and love for that race that had dissipated. But we can all agree, I think the road course didn't do that as intended, and now 3 years later, we're back, or 4 years later, we're back on the oval. I think it's the right move, and I feel like the excitement and the energy that we've kind of been longing for the Brickyard 400 has certainly returned. So that's a positive.
Pete, how about you?
Couldn't be happier that we're doing this, and I agree everything that Jordan said. I get why they did it. The guys, to me, racing on the road course there is like putting a mustache on the Mona Lisa when you go to Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I understand why they did it. Somewhat of an entertaining race, kind of turned into a debacle there in the last couple of years. But going back on the oval, the prestige of the Brickyard 400, the 30th anniversary, all of those things, and not, the least of which with this next gen car, this Gen 7 car, a lot of people feel this will be a good race on that racetrack when we get down there this weekend. So I'm really happy. This is one I had circled on my calendar all season long.
I agree with Pete. To me, and I've said it for the last number of years, Jordan, you don't go race at Indianapolis to not race on the oval. That's the historical part. That's where you go. You don't go race at Daytona to race on the road course. You go to race the oval. And I think that's the prestige of this place.
It is. And I mean, you can try to spin it and say, well, listen, just being at, IMS matters. But the reality is what matters at IMS is the oval and not the road course. And we have seen what the alternative is. And I listen, I was in favor of the move. I get it why they tried it, but it didn't work. And I'll admit I was wrong. And I'm glad they're going back. And it means something to win there on the oval. The road course is just, it's another road course, right? It doesn't have the same prestige. And I think what NASCAR lost in all this, too, was a major. It was always about Daytona 500, Coke 600, Southern 500, the Brickyard 400. Well, when you take the Brickyard 400 away, you're down to 3 majors, and you can't replicate that. You can't plug and play something else into that spot and say, "Help, this is now a major." That tradition is gone, and now that it's you're going back on the 30-year anniversary too, it just resonates a lot more than it ever has.
All right, Pete, you both have mentioned 30th anniversary. When you get these moments that you mark in time and say 30th anniversary, and we all remember the first one, we all realize how old we're getting, right?
Yes, sadly, you're right about that.
Truth.
And I remember back, and I was working locally here in Chicago in 1992. They decided they were going to have this tire test there, and I got called to go down there to cover a tire test. Where I think there were 12 teams down there, and 50,000 people were inside the Indianapolis Motor Speedway just to see stock cars on that track. And then 2 years later, the first Brickyard 400 happened, and back then it was on a Saturday, so it had a whole different feel to it. But, you go back to 30 years and certainly, we'll go through the timeline of it, and some of the prestige sort of eroded away, the attendance and all those kinds of things. But I'll still go back to being on that racetrack. I've been able to cover some Indy 500s, having NASCAR on that track, I think, this coming weekend. That's what this is about. And Jordan's spot on. The crown jewel was gone. It's back this weekend on Sunday.
People forget that, the kissing of the bricks was a NASCAR tradition.
Yes, it was.
NASCAR's Dale Jarrett, those guys started this thing. And now the Indy guys do it too.
It is, and that's cool. I mean, you talk about all the history of IMS, and it's nice that NASCAR can have that kind of moment that's become a signature there, which is not something that they can do easily. And to have Dale Jarrett be the first guy to kiss the bricks, and now it's an iconic thing where every Indy 500, what do? They bring the winner out to the bricks, and they have that famous photo. So cool to see it happen. And then you got the fence climbing and everything else, and Tony climbing. You've had a lot of moments happen at IMS that we probably don't give it credit for. It's really easy to pick it apart about what it's not anymore or what it hasn't been for a long time. But let's not forget what it was and how it still matters today.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, we talk about moments for speedways that stick with tracks. We think about the traffic at Kentucky the first time around and how that affected the track, Pete, and they never recovered from that. And Texas had that the first year they had it. It took them a long time to bounce back from that. And the Goodyear tire debacle they had at Indianapolis, where they're coming into pit every 11 laps or whatever it was. And they never really recovered from that. And I know you mentioned the new car, and even coming off of Pocono last week, a lot of the guys feel like this car is more adaptable to this track than the previous cars have been.
Yeah, it feels that way. And, all of that prestige and all of that conversation that we're going to have all weekend about being back on the oval and all of that, and that's all great, and I'm on board with that. But at the end of the day, they're going to throw the green flag, and it's going to be about when the green flag flies and the checker flag flies and what happens in between. And listen, you're never gonna mistake the racing at Indianapolis Motor Speedway for Martinsville or a short track or anything like that. It's got its own nuances to it and all. But I think you're right about that, Brett. And unfortunately, it's the old saying, you only get one chance to make a good first impression. And I think a lot of people are still turned off by what happened with that tire debacle there. That's in the past. I hope people get over that. But at the end of the day, I just think I hope it's going to be a good race to go along with all the prestige that we're going to have there in the pomp and circumstance before we get things going on Sunday afternoon.
Being that it's the 30th anniversary, Jordan, and being that it's a return to the oval, is that going to give this race enough juice?
It should. I talked to Roger Penske last week for a story that's going to run on The Athletic this week, and he told me ticket sales for this race are higher than they were in 18 and 19, which is encouraging to me. I mean, listen, you're not going to go back to the days of 350,000 people attending this race, but that's not NASCAR in this climate. That's not a lot of sports in this climate today. So I think there's an energy and a buzz because they're going back to the oval. Obviously, the quality of racing we've seen on these kind of tracks now is much better than it was with the old car. And I think, Pete hit on it. It's like this car offers an opportunity to give you better racing. And if you have better racing, people are going to come regardless. And I think that's the key thing there is give them a quality product and then get the people out there.
It was interesting this week, Pete. I know you had Rudy Fugle on your show this week on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio, the crew chief for William Byron, the number 24, talking about remembering Jeff Gordon driving that 24 to victory lane the first time. Of course, an Indiana kid. William Byron's not an Indiana kid, but the pressure that he feels going back there on the 30th anniversary on the oval with that number 24.
Yeah, he owned it. He said it's a good kind of pressure because of that number and what it means there. So looking to go back there. But what's interesting, Rudy said also, obviously all those years when we got off that oval track and went to road course racing, but all those years prior, he was truck racing. So there's a lot of drivers, a lot of crew chiefs that have never been at Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the oval. So you're going to have sort of that component as well. But certainly there's going to be a lot of sentimentality this weekend. And obviously leading the way there, the 24 car with William Byron and all that the Brickyard 400 meant to Jeff Gordon over his career.
Yeah, you got 3 former winners in the field this week who have won on the oval.
Yeah.
Jimmy Johnson, Kyle Busch, and Brad Keselowski.
Yep. Not many.
Not many.
I mean, when Harvick retired, a lot of those went away.
Yeah. There's that. Yeah.
Pretty amazing.
But I think that's good. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about it. It's fresh for everybody. And I think that's another big part of it. And everyone that we've spoken with has said the same thing that Rudy said, though, not so much the car number, but the reverence that they have for that racetrack. And, and again, I get it. I was there we covered a Grand Am race back not that long ago, and they're kissing the bricks. It just didn't feel right. This is going to feel right on Sunday when the winner of the Brickyard 400 kisses those bricks.
And what stands out to me, it really feels like the teams are putting an added importance on this race. Like you talk to people in the garage, it's like Denny Hamlin is missing this race from his resume. He's won a lot of majors. He's won every one but this race. He wants to check that box. Kyle Larson would love to win here. It feels like the big teams are going to show up this weekend and bring their A games. And really, this is going to be a showdown in a lot of respects. And I think we're going to get a good indication of where everybody stands, kind of setting up for the playoffs. I'm excited because we tend to lose sight of the fact that this race, this track, has always been where the best teams and drivers show out. And you need a good pit crew because you've got a lot of green flag pit stops. You need strategy, so you need a great crew chief. You have to be a great driver to navigate this track because it's really challenging, very temperamental. You need all of these different things, horsepower, aero. And so you don't see fluke teams and drivers here. Typically, guys who win this race go on to contend and win the championship. And I think Sunday is going to be a precursor to that.
It's going to be interesting. And you think about, in the past, we've seen the people who run well at Pocono tend to run well at Indianapolis. And the guy that just won at Pocono, oh, by the way, he drives for the guy that owns the Speedway.